You might want to avoid these churches for their scary ghost stories, evil presences, and paranormal activity. Coming in at number 5, we have Oradour Church in France. Located in central France, a few miles from Limoges lies a now abandoned town called Oradour-sur-Glane. The town is now filled with empty houses, train lines that are out of order, and a sign of tragedy. With roadside walls pocked with bullet holes, fire marks, scorching stone houses, the church roof has gone through some massive explosion. This tragedy happened on June 10, 1944, when Adolf Eichmann received information from members of the Vichy regime that SS officers had been captured and were being held by members of the French resistance at Oradour-sur-Glane. Diekman led his team to Oradour-sur-Glane intent on revenge. Whether he went to Oradour-sur-Glane instead of Oradour-sur-Glane on purpose, or whether he mixed up the two towns because of the similarity in their names, is something we will never know. The men of the village were quickly rounded up, then herded into a variety of surrounding barns and garages, as the women and children were confined to the local church. Then a gas explosion was placed in the church and lit aflame. There was only a handful to survive the tragic accident that happened at the church of this town. With all the lives lost in the church and surrounding town of that night, it is said to be haunted by many spirits. As some witnesses report, as they stand at the church's windows at night, they see the dark spirits of the people who lost their lives walking through the ruined village's deserted streets. Others state they often smell the aroma of burning wood and flesh as it lingers over this abandoned village. Until recently, the new residents would leave gifts along the border of the village of the martyred as a peace offering for the spirits that still haunt the church. In the end, we will never actually know the reason behind the attack upon the Oradour Church on June 10, 1944, though some think there was an evil entity or spirit upon the church that coerced the attack to happen. Coming in at number 4, we have St. Mary the Virgin, England. In an English village, you'll find the Church of St. Mary the Virgin, built around 1350 just outside the main settlement. The church in Clophill, Bedfordshire, was abandoned for around 170 years after it fell into disuse in the 1840s. There are a few odd things about this ancient little church, the most significant being that it was supposedly built facing the wrong direction. Churches are traditionally oriented to face east, the direction from which the sun rises, which in the Christian religion is associated with the location of heaven and the return of the Messiah. Churches are positioned with the altar facing east so people will pray in that holy direction. Some have claimed that because St. Mary the Virgin Church faces away from God, it thus opens its doors to hell. Indeed, the church has a long history of reported hauntings and supposed satanic rituals. The 14th century church was reportedly used for satanic rituals in the 1960s. As rumor has it, bones were dug up and arranged in satanic patterns. A paranormal investigator has speculated that some kind of black magic was performed at a church in Clophill, making it one of the most haunted places in Bedfordshire. The investigator explained that there's definitely something strange going on at the church, and this personal view is that it's down to black magic practices held there. He explains that he has also had many people confess the terrifying experience that they've had with the church. One filmmaker told the investigator that he saw a dark shape that was extremely tall coming towards him. The filmmaker and his colleague ran when he felt something grab his arm, even though he couldn't see anything. Once police arrived to the scene, instead of laughing the claim off, they congested that they've spent a lot of time guarding the abandoned site, as many people experienced the same thing. Over the years, many people have reported seeing strange things near the church, from mysterious hooded monks to tall dark figures.
Number 3 on this list is the Couple's Demon. William Hope was a paranormal investigator who lived from 1863 to 1933. During that time, he was responsible for capturing a wide array of spiritual photographs which showcase ghosts and demons. Now, after evaluating some of his work, I think it's fair to assume that some of it is doctored. I'm not sure how one man would have been able to capture all the demonic pictures that he did without potentially faking a few. That being said though, I don't think that everything he's done has been doctored, and I imagine that there are some with serious legitimacy to them. One of his most famous is of an older couple with what clearly looks to be a demon standing behind them. When they took this photo, nobody was physically there, and they could only capture this devilish creature when they looked at the film after the fact. Some other entries on this list, I mean, you might be able to classify as a ghost, but this is 100% a demon. The eyes are black and unforgiving, and it looks as if you're getting sucked into a black hole of nothingness. You can't make out this creature's lower body at all, and she's just all black. She reminds me a lot of a few urban legends of female demons appearing around the world. Their stories differ, but there are some commonalities between them all. Usually a woman appears like this to a stranger, asks them a few questions, and if they don't don't answer properly will drag them to hell. I'm actually surprised that the people in this photograph managed to get out of it safely without feeling her presence or being attacked while they were there. I'm pretty sure that the church can explain this one, they just probably won't like the explanation very much. Number 2 on this list is the lady in the lift. Whenever you step into an elevator, it feels as if you've stepped into a portal of some kind. If you really think about it, it kind of is a portal considering you start on one floor and then finish on a different one. Now obviously there isn't anything magical about said elevators, and this portal of sorts is really just a mechanical innovation that takes you up and down tall buildings. That being said, this non-paranormal portal definition might not apply to the elevator in this photo. As we can see, there are a few people hanging out and chatting by the elevators. This was a picture captured by a doctor in a hospital in Bolivia. The elevator in the right of the image decided to open all by itself though. The group didn't think anything of it at the time, but when they looked back, noticed something fairly unsettling. The apparition of a woman is clearly standing in the elevator, staring right at them. No one knows who this woman is, but it's clear that she's either a ghost or a demon. Elevators have always seemed to have a connection to ghostly apparitions for whatever reason. Maybe it's because they do give off the sensation of being a portal, but there are a lot of stories connected to elevators and hauntings. This photo actually reminds me a lot of a haunted place in Austria. A young girl was at a university residence during Christmas. She was pretty much the only one who stayed there and didn't go home for the holidays. While she was there by herself, she accidentally stepped into the elevator shaft and fell to her death. Now she's set to haunt that elevator and torment those who step inside. Maybe this photo is of a similar story, but just at the hospital. It's impossible to say for sure, but either way guys, I'd be taking the stairs. And finally, number 1 on this list is the little boy. This photo is extremely scary and just flat out disturbing. BuzzFeed writes, the Reddit user who posted this image was deeply skeptical that there was anything paranormal going on, although they couldn't deny there is something chilling about the figure of a little boy staring out from the ruins of an old school. I grew up in a small rural town in between mountains. A couple years ago they were tearing down an old elementary school. A guy my mom knew went in and took pics with his cell phone. When he uploaded them, this was one of the pics. I don't believe in stuff like this at all, I just really don't know how to explain it since it was a cell phone pic, and I'm pretty sure that no one in my podunk hometown knows how to make fake pics. So maybe he doesn't know how, but I know how to explain it. You're in the ruins of an old school and those ruins are haunted by the demon of a young boy. Sometimes the simplest answers are the right ones, and this to me looks like an example of that. This little dude 100% looks possessed, and you can't even really make out his legs. Nor can you actually see his arms either for that matter. Kind of difficult to make up a logical explanation for a kid with no arms and no legs floating in the middle of an abandoned school. Also, side note, but can you imagine being the one to take this picture? Like you turn a corner and you see that dude and your first thought is, I'm gonna pull out my phone and take a picture of this kid. Like if that's me, I am straight up running out of that thing and we're burning that building hot.
Number 5. Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles, or Mephisto to his friends, is a demon who features prominently in German folklore. Although he has since become somewhat of a stock character, he is primarily known for the role he plays in the Faust legend. The Faust legend is inspired by the life of a real alchemist, astrologer, and magician, Johann Georg Faust, who lived in Germany during the late 1400s and early 1500s. It is, of course, unclear how closely Faust's life follows the legend it inspired. The tale of his interactions with Mephistopheles has been passed down for centuries after his death. In the folk legend, Faust has become depressed with his life as a scholar and tries to take his own life. When the attempt fails, he calls on the devil, hoping to acquire magical powers that will allow him to indulge in all the earthly pleasures he can imagine. The devil then sends his representative, Mephisto, to make a deal with Faust. Faust and the demon broker a deal that will make Mephistopheles serve Faust with his powers for a set number of years. When that time is up, Mephisto will claim his soul and take Faust to hell, where he will be punished and forced to serve Satan for all of eternity. Faust uses Mephistopheles for a variety of purposes over the years, most famously to help him seduce a beautiful young maiden named Gretchen, with whom he has a child. When the child is born, Gretchen realizes the baby's unholy nature and throws it into the water, causing her to be arrested and executed for murder. Faust is corrupted and realizes his sins are unforgivable and is carried away to hell by Mephistopheles. True or not, the Faust legend has become deeply ingrained trend in culture, and I'm sure the Vatican worries that their flock will not realize the message of the tale and will try to make deals of their own with Satan's representative, Mephistopheles. Number 4. Incubus. One of the more taboo evil spirits on this list is the incubus, the male equivalent to a succubus. While a succubus is known for seducing and sleeping with men in order to impregnate themselves with ghostly children, the incubus comes into a woman's bed while she is asleep and impregnates her. She will then carry the baby to term, giving birth to deformed witches, wizards, or demons. Not all of these offspring become evil, however, with the first legend of a wizard being fathered by an incubus actually being the legendary wizard who served King Arthur during the days of Camelot. In the late 1400s, demonology text Malleus Maleficarum by the German Catholic clergyman Heinrich Kramer, the author talks about incubi and states that there are 5 ways to get rid of them: moving the afflicted woman to a different location, exorcism, sacramental confession, the sign of the cross, or excommunication of the attacking entity, which even the book itself admits is basically just another term for an exorcism. If we are to believe Kramer's account, then incubi seem to be relatively easy demons to get rid of, for a demon, being subject to all of the usual tricks of the exorcist trade, and being able to be shaken by simply moving. But according to the works of the Franciscan friar Ludovico Maria Sinistari, they are much more difficult to deal with than the typical demon, with him saying that an incubus does not obey exorcists, has no dread of exorcism, shows no reverence for holy things, at the approach of which they are not in the least bit overawed. If this description is true, then this would be one of the types of demons the Vatican would most dread going up against, as none of their usual tools or techniques seem to have any effect on this seducer from hell. Number 3. Master Leonard. I never thought someone named Leonard could be frightening, and yet here we are. Leonard is one of the spirits or demons featured in the 1818 demonology text, the Dictionnaire Infernal by Jacques Collin, which describes various demons as well as their hierarchies. Leonard is described as a 3-horned goat with the face of a man who uses his horns to initiate his followers and grant them satanic powers. His job title is Grand Master of the Nocturnal Orgies of Demons, which is undeniably impressive. He is known for having banquets thrown in his honor by his followers, where they all consume the flesh of a stillborn goat, which is then eaten without salt and boiled with reptiles in order to depurify the sinless meat. He also has a habit of transforming into a handsome young soldier and luring young women into the wilderness, where he will impregnate them, with all the resulting children being stillborn as an offering to sin. Male followers of Leonard are granted the ability to transform into monstrous animals, or even the incubi, which we already detailed. What makes Leonard so frightening for the Vatican isn't just his ability to corrupt people, but the idea that his actions directly lead to more demonic creatures that they are then unable to effectively fight being created.
In at number 3 we have Egg Hill Church, Spring Hills, Pennsylvania. Considered one of the most haunted churches known to man, we have Egg Hill Church in Spring Hill, Pennsylvania. The church was built in 1860 and was out of use by the 1920s. The most well-known story about Egg Hill Church is of the great number of people that supposedly lost their lives. This occurred at the turn of the century in the 1800s, when the pastor at the time ended the life of his whole congregation by poison and kept them in the nearby woods. Other stories say that the pastor only ended the life of the people of the parish. He reportedly would end their lives one by one under the mysterious circumstances and got away with it, until the day that he would be discovered, where he would end his own life in the church. Some who have been to the church say they have seen drawings of pentagrams and goats appear on the walls and ceilings, written by some unknown entity. Others say that from outside the church you can hear strange noises coming from the inside when the church is locked up and supposedly empty. Some claim the sounds are similar to children's voices. Therefore, there is no doubt that this haunted church has the potential to be cursed by the devil. In at number 2 we have Aquia Episcopal Church in Virginia. This church is said to be one of the most haunted churches in Virginia. Legend says that the church and the church graveyard, which has graves dating back to 1738, are both home to paranormal activity that has taken place for over 200 years. Even the early years of the church being opened were marked with tragedy. In the mid-18th century, a woman was hiding from a group of men within the church's walls and lost her life. Even more upsetting was the fact that she was not discovered until years later, when the church reopened after the Revolutionary War. War. No one knows exactly the details of the loss, yet there have been several claims of paranormal activity since. Her hair just as blonde as the day she lost her life. At that time, the church had lost funding due to the Revolutionary War, and that might have been the reason why no one discovered her body until later. Moreover, it's been said that blood stains from the murder remained on the floorboards for nearly 100 years, till it was replaced altogether with concrete. Many ghost stories worked their way through the community after the skeleton was discovered. Many parishioners refused to set foot in the church after dark. In the 1900s, people decided to seek evidence of hauntings for themselves. Many returned with chilling tales of having encountered an unfriendly presence. Built before the Civil War, this church is reportedly visited by the ghost of a soldier killed during the conflict. The most haunted part of the building is the church tower. Others claim that the reason for the haunting involves a young woman who was murdered there. The eerie lights and unexplained sounds are reason enough to stay away after dark. Even today, there is plenty of paranormal activity associated with the church grounds. Many visitors have reported hearing footsteps running through the graveyard accompanied by the sound of a violent struggle. Others claim to see the figure of a young golden-haired woman peering from the balcony window. With all the tragedies and loss of lives that happen within the walls of this church, not to mention the paranormal activity, it's safe to assume that there is some evil spirits and energy cursing the church. And finally, in at number 1 we have St. Columbkille, Ontario. Dating back to 1855, St. Columbkille Church was founded and located in the hamlet of Uptergrove. The original frame church was torn down and the present brick edifice was constructed in 1905. This structure sits on a hill far back from the road and can easily be viewed when driving on Highway 12 east from Aurelia. The ghost stories have been spreading since over 100 years ago, classifying the church was haunted, and these tales have been circulated ever since. Today, the church is deemed haunted by some local residents and visitors. There have been many reports of ghost sightings, shadowy figures that will suddenly appear, creaking doors, and eerie music that will play randomly from the organ. There have also been numerous reports of shadowy sightings of a figure wearing a black hat that floats through the choir area, creating chills for those who had observed it. Mysterious candlelight has been seen flickering from the windows on stormy nights. Many believe the spirit responsible is that of a former priest who, according to legend, pledged to complete a specific number of sermons, though he lost his life before he was able to attain that number. Now some churchgoers say he is returning to fulfill that promise.
Number 5 on this list is Lord Combermere, or maybe better put as the ghost of Lord Combermere. The picture that we're going to look at today depicts the ghostly silhouette of the late Lord Combermere sitting in his chair. Insider writes, amateur photographer Corbet allegedly set up her camera and took this hour-long exposure while the funeral of her brother-in-law, Lord Combermere, was taking place 4 miles from the home. Interestingly, the apparition that appears to be sitting in the deceased Lord Combermere's chair is suggested to be Lord Combermere himself. I think the scariest part about this photograph is the timing. The fact that this was apparently captured literally right when the funeral for this man was being held. It's very possible that his spirit could have still been in and around the area and wasn't quite ready to leave the world of the living yet. Ghost Story UK says it's thought by some that during that time a servant might have come into the room and sat briefly in the chair, creating the transparent image. This idea was refuted by members of the household, all testifying that they were all attending Lord Combermere's funeral. Sir William Barrett, who investigated the case and reported on it in the Journal of the Society for Physical Research, was not satisfied. Working on the theory that a manservant may have come in and seated himself in the chair, he took a test photograph and got a picture that was almost a duplicate of the Combermere photograph. The matter seemed ended, but as he told in his book On the Threshold of the Unseen in 1918, sometime later he received a letter from Lord Combermere's daughter-in-law about the photograph. She said that the face was always too indistinct to be quite convincing to me, though some of his children had no doubt at all of the identity. I may add, none of the manservants in the house closely resembled the figure and were all young men who were all attending the funeral. No one resembled him and everyone was out of the house when this photo was taken. For years the church and others have tried to explain this photograph, but they just simply can't. Maybe it was the ghost of Lord Combermere, or maybe it was a demon playing a trick on all of us. We may never know. Number 4 on this list is Freddy Jackson. In this photo, we're going to be looking at Sir Victor Goddard's Royal Air Force Squadron. This picture was taken in 1919 after World War I and showed a bunch of young strapping pilots. What's wild about this though is the unexpected visitor that we have in the back row. If we zoom into the top row and look at the man fourth from the left, we can see something over his right shoulder. an apparition of sorts that resembles a human face. After people started taking note of this and examined it, those who had worked with the squadron identified that face as Freddy Jackson. Freddy Jackson was a mechanic with this squadron for a while, but the crazy part is that he had died in a propeller accident several days earlier. Similarly to Lord Combermere, the day that this picture was taken was the day of his funeral. Maybe his ghost showed up because he was pissed all his friends were taking pictures and not paying their respects. But seriously though, how on earth do you explain a photo like that with tons of other people in it? It's impossible for it to have been staged, and it's clear that there's something there. Hopefully Freddy was able to find peace after his impromptu photo bomb.
Number 2. Venice. I'd never heard of this demon before doing my little research for this video, and let me tell you, it's a regret of mine that I didn't know about it earlier, because my life has been improved since knowing about this thing. Venice is a demon whose main goal and pleasure in life is to convert good, pious, righteous people into nasty sinners so they can get pulled down into hell. It's hard enough trying to live a life free of sin without demons also trying to trick me into damning my eternal soul. I already can't walk down the street without coveting 3 things in a window. Now I gotta deal with this? Luckily for me, Venice probably wouldn't be terribly interested in me, since swaying me with sin is remarkably easy. He goes after priests, members of the cloth, people of devout faith. It's like his job to take charge of the really tough cases to tempt towards sin. He's a master of deception, seduction, trickery, bribery, intimidation, and a whole lot of other nasty demon business that probably looks good on his Tinder profile. Where he gets kind of wild though is that apparently he only ever talked in rhyme, which was supposed to help him lull you into a sense of comfort that causes you to trust him and makes you more likely to sin. I don't know about rhyme making me sin. That's feels like what they said would happen if I listened to rap music. Besides his freestyling bars, Venice is a shape-shifting demon capable of taking whatever form he pleases, but he prefers to take forms that are wooden in nature, like a cursed tree or something for example. He's also depicted as often having many limbs, growing outwards and fractal like a spider might. Most insidiously about all that Venice does is that he stares deeply into your soul and sees your deepest, darkest, most sinful desires, meaning he has definitely read my Frasier fanfiction. Venice then, with his conjuring and shape-shifting, makes your desire manifest in reality, where he can tempt you with sin up close and personal to see just how truly committed to the path of the righteous you are. And finally, coming in number 1 at the list is Moloch. Perhaps you've heard the name before. Moloch is an old god, real old, like Old Testament old. Moloch takes the form of an impressively sized deity with the head of a cow or bull instead of man, and usually he has his arms stretched outwards towards a fire in most statues or paintings of him. This is because this was his preferred method of sacrifice. Whatever you were to offer him, usually human, were to be cast into the flames for Moloch's pleasure. He's thought to be a pagan fertility deity, mentioned across various religious texts and worshipped by the Canaanites. Moses forbade the Israelites to worship Moloch, as he was a false god. Moloch quite enjoyed sacrifices and being paid homage, and it's said that this was always to appease his wrath. In Paradise Lost, the epic poem that fleshed out much of what we know and think about hell, Moloch was described as being a fallen angel and one of Satan's greatest warriors. This depiction paints him as a bloodthirsty soldier of hell who is eager to spur a war against heaven's forces, and he is worshipped as a deity specifically to anger God above. Sounds like he makes lovely company.
Number 5 on this list is the farm demon. Most of the time we look at these photos and they're typically pretty old, captured 100 years ago and often chalked up as being a double exposure error or something like that. I don't think that can be said for the farm demon though. Stephen Wagner writes, "This amazing photo was taken by photographer and graphic designer Neil Sandbach in 2008. Neil was photographing some scenic shots at a farm in England as part of a project for wedding stationery. The couple planned to have their wedding ceremony held there later. Neil was astonished when he examined the digital photo on his computer. There, as if peeking around a corner at him, is a ghostly white, almost glowing figure of what looks like a child. Neil says he's quite sure that there was no one there at the time. There's further corroboration that this is a true ghost photo. Neil had shown the couple the anomalous photo, and before the wedding they asked the staff at the farm if they'd ever seen any spooky experiences there before. They didn't mention Neil's photo. Indeed, they admitted that the figure of a young young boy dressed in white night clothes had been seen on several occasions around the barn. So it looks as if this barn is haunted by some type of demon child, and Neil just happened to get lucky enough and capture it on camera. I think what's really scary about this though is that they had no idea it was there while they were staying at the farm, meaning that this demon child would have been stalking Neil the whole time. And what's even crazier than that is that this couple literally continued with the wedding. Like, scenery and all that quaint stuff is important, but a demon child running around the grounds? That's definitely a no-go wedding spot for me. Number 4 on this list is the Demon Pilot. In 1987, Mrs. Sayer and some of her closest friends were visiting Fleet Air Arms Station at Yeovilton, Somerset in England. As is customary with places that have a bunch of airplanes, you gotta take a photo of you inside of one as if you're flying it. Mrs. Sayer hopped into a helicopter that had been out of commission for a while, and she got her friends to take a snap of her while she was in it. The picture that came out was not what Mrs. Sayer or any of her pals expected though. When they took a look at the photo a while later, they saw what is a very clear image of a pilot sitting next to her. Actually, claiming that it's a pilot is a bit of a stretch. In truth, it's just a figure with a white shirt on that looks like a man. What this thing's connection to Mrs. Sayer or to the helicopter is anyone's guess. Apparently, when that photo was being taken, even though Mrs. Sayer had a bright smile on her face, she wasn't feeling so hot. In fact, she was feeling rather scared and anxious. She had no idea why at the time, and it was a passing feeling that went away after a few minutes, but just an overwhelming feeling of anxiety while she was there. To this day, nobody knows what this apparition is, what it's doing there, or what could have caused it to appear. Number 3 on this list is the Pink Lady. In Greencastle, Indiana, there's a massive mansion called the O'Hara Mansion. The pictures in question are by a man named Guy Winters who was investigating said mansion several years ago. This mansion is abandoned and has been for some time, and the locals like to keep it that way. Apparently they have believed for quite some time that some sort of demonic entity lives there and watches over the grounds. It's thought that trespassing on them could endanger your life. This didn't deter Guy Winters and his friend Terry, who wanted to find out for themselves if there really was some sort of evil presence here. They went into the mansion and stayed there for several days and nights with cameras documenting everything. What they found was the Pink Lady, a vaporous pink demon that Guy Winters was able to snap on photograph. Apparently, as is with most of this demon photography, Guy didn't actually see the apparition in real life, but it was only noticed after the picture was developed. This apparition definitely looks like something evil if you ask me. It almost looks like a demon witch, if that's even a thing, but certainly something that has the intention of possessing you or consuming your soul. This picture went along with a bunch of weird occurrences at this place too. Apparently the two boys were perpetually on edge and kept having strange things happen to them. Things would move without them touching them, the temperature in the rooms would change drastically. They both talked about having a voice in their head that they weren't familiar with, something that had them starting to become convinced that they were losing their minds. They might not have known it at the time, but it seems like all of these things can be chalked up to the work of the Pink Lady. Number 2 on this list is St. Louis Cathedral. So we already talked about the Lady of Guadalupe Church, but the only reason that church even exists is because of the St. Louis Church. Also located in New Orleans and arguably more haunted than the previous one. This church is interesting because one could argue that it's been around a lot longer than the other New Orleans one, but that also isn't necessarily true. That's because this is actually the 4th church to go up on this spot. 3 previous times the church that was here has suffered serious damage that caused it to get replaced. One was from a hurricane that swept through the entire area and totally knocked the church to the ground. One was by a raging fire, and one was simply by wear and tear of being around for so many years. It was during one of the times that this place was in disrepair that other church was built. Along with these incidents, it should also be noted that the church used to be used to bury some of New Orleans' prominent figures. So when you walk through this church, you're literally walking over a ton of graves in the process. Through the deep history this church has, it's no wonder that ghostly sightings are a regular here. Perhaps the most famous ghost associated with St. Louis Cathedral is that of Père Antoine. Pierre was a Spanish Capuchin friar at the St. Louis Cathedral. He arrived in New Orleans in 1774 and was named pastor. His generosity and kindness to the people of New Orleans made him very popular. He was well liked by all of New Orleans. His death on January 19, 1829 was met with a somber and mourning city. He was laid to rest inside the St. Louis Cathedral 3 days after his death. Since his death in 1829, the ghost of Pierre Antoine has been seen in St. Louis Cathedral by an untold number of people. His ghost is easily recognized as there's a portrait of him inside the cathedral. It seems as if the ghost of Pierre Antoine especially likes to show himself around the holiday seasons. Commonly, the ghost of Pierre Antoine is seen near the altar and on the balconies. So guys, what I just read is from an article written by Ghost City Tours describing how serious this haunting is at this church. Apparently Pierre Antoine isn't the only ghost either, but people have reported seeing the ghost of another pastor and some other apparitions of what looks to be people from the 1700s. Clearly something about a New Orleans church is very attractive to the paranormal. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Abbey of the Black Hag. This church would be a tad bit difficult to pray before entering because there isn't too much left to enter. It's located in Ireland and is a ruin of its former self. The story starts many hundreds of years ago when this place was referred to as St. Catherine's Augustine Abbey. This place was established in 1298 and was pretty great right up until the last abbess took over. It's said that this woman practiced witchcraft here and brought great evil to the others that lived here and those nearby. Pope Martin V caught wind of this and ordered the immediate closure of this place. Everybody left, except for the witch. She stayed here completely by herself, practicing magic all day and all night. Eventually, through her consistent spell practicing and probably the fact that she never bathed ever, her skin blackened to such a degree that people started referring to this place as the Abbey of the Black Hag. Apparently this witch still resides here to this day, and the locals fear going here and risking her wrath. Tales have been told of livestock going missing, weird symbols appearing in the ground, and even the occasional child wandering into this area never to be heard from again. I feel like praying before you go to a place like this might not actually help that much. In fact, I'd just try avoiding it altogether if I was you.
Number 5. Slaugh. Our first entry on this list is something called a slaugh, which manifests as a bird, predominantly something like a raven or a crow. We all know corvids are the scariest classification of bird there is. It's Celtic in nature, which means almost certainly I am pronouncing that name wrong. It's probably something more like Slaugh. They can take many forms, but prefer to do their hunting while donning the form of a corvid. What do they hunt exactly? Your soul. Your decaying soul, to be precise. These spirits seek out the dying, the weak, and stalk them, waiting like little carrion eaters. Not to worry, they also seek out the living too, waiting for the perfect time to strike. It's said that they seek out those who are experiencing heartbreak or intense emotional pain, so keep yourself in good spirits, I guess, lest you be attacked by the demon crows. The best way to avoid them, I can't believe this is what it said, but I looked it up, is to keep your windows and doors shut. Cause you know, they are birds. Stay inside and never say their name. Well, I probably should have read that part first, I guess. Sorry. Lore says that these demons were considered so evil and heinous that they were actually banned from hell. Imagine that. I did not even know that was a possibility. I thought hell was kind of where you kept all the most cruel spirits, but I didn't know you could be too hardcore for it. Love the image of Satan looking up at these birds and being like, get out, scat you! These creatures come from ancient Irish folklore, where they were first thought to be dark spirits, or just plain old evil entities. But as the years went by, slowly the narrative shifted that these birds were the souls of sinners and damned cast out of hell. In the early 1900s, these creatures were sometimes attributed to mysterious deaths around Europe, predominantly Ireland and Scotland. It was said that when petty criminals and ne'er-do-wells would turn up dead inexplicably, it was the handiwork of these birds. These birds, I got scared to say their name. I don't want to mess with it. I'm just gonna keep calling them these birds. These birds wait until your last tender moments on this earth, and when your soul is at its weakest, they swoop in and swallow your soul. What happens to a soul consumed by them? Well, I'm glad you asked. You become part of the flock, doomed to fly with them for the rest of time, feeding on other lost souls. But if spending eternity flying with a bunch of haunted ravens doesn't sound like your deal, I don't blame you. Why not spend eternity with the top 5 scary gang, and click through on the videos and watch forever and ever. Or maybe just an hour here and there. Toss a subscribe too while you're at it. Number 4. Jikininki. If you're familiar with the story of the Wendigo, and no doubt if you're watching Top 5 Scary, you're familiar with the story of the Wendigo because I can't go 3 minutes without shouting about the Wendigo, this spirit is very similar. It's sort of the Japanese Buddhist answer to it. The Jikininki are people who in life were terribly greedy, selfish, and now in death find themselves cursed to forever want more, to never be satisfied, and to also nefariously seek out human bodies to eat to satisfy their dark cravings. Yeah, I'm just gonna slip that one under the door. They stalk in the nighttime, scavenging for freshly deceased bodies and food offerings that have been left out for the dead. It's said that they loot the corpses that they eat too, which I'm gonna be honest, seems remarkably rude. I can understand eating the flesh of a dead body, you know, you're an evil spirit, we all gotta do what we do. But I draw the line at looting. It's a whole other thing entirely to root through their pockets for spare change. Folklore suggests that they use the loot they scavenge off of their victims to bribe city officials to leave them alone to their dark dealings. I knew politicians were corrupt, but I didn't know they took bribes from ghosts. Jinkies, that's a whole new level. It's said that the Jikininki look like decomposing cadavers, with inhuman features like glowing eyes and sharp claws. Interestingly though, some local variants of the tale suggest that they're able to disguise their true nature. They only take this demonic form during the night when they're hunting, and during the daytime, they're able to blend in like any other regular human, perhaps to help them scope out their victims. Should you ever cross a Jikininki, their eyes will be able to give it away, as you'll see the red glow behind their eyes. And when you do, you'll find yourself frozen in fear. Number 3, Popobawa. Now that name might sound deceiving, cause to be honest, it does sound just the littlest bit cute. But this thing is the farthest thing from adorable imaginable. This terrifying demon hails from the island of Zanzibar in East Africa. If you don't know Zanzibar, it's where Freddie Mercury came from. Look it up, you learned something today. Popobawa is Swahili for batwing, referring to the creature's most common form that it takes of a giant, vaguely humanoid bat creature. But the bat form is just one of its many appearances that it can take. A Popobawa can take on whatever it pleases, and is more of a shadow creature than anything else, preferring to dwell in the darkness in a sort of formless way. Now, a shadowy, shape-shifting bat creature would already be enough horrifying qualifiers to land this spirit in a top 5 list of scariest spirits around the globe. But it's this next little tidbit that really earns its spot on this list. The Popobawa specifically targets victims who don't believe in it. So, if you don't believe in Popobawas, you better start. You're in one. That's not really how that joke went. It's thought to be behind the cause of an outbreak of hysteria through Zanzibar in the late 90s. When there were several reports through village after village of men reporting that they had been attacked in the night by this demonic creature. It got so bad that eventually villagers would resort to sleeping outside their homes out of a belief that the creature wouldn't attack someone outside their house. Maybe there's like, I don't know, demon etiquette laws, I don't know. It's said that the Popobawa is hunting you if you can smell an intense smell of sulfur around your home. Mostly it comes out at night. Mostly. The way it gets you is particularly unpleasant. Instead of just like eating you or slashing or doing something normal that a normal monster would do, the Popobawa crushes you during the night by sitting on you. Ha! People who claim they've been attacked say they wake up in the middle of the night with an intense pressure on their ribs and chest and have trouble breathing. It's been said that if you ever suspect you've caught the attention of the Popobawa, the best way to rid yourself of it is to spread knowledge and tell everyone everything you know, because after all, it goes after non-believers. Not that, that's why I'm telling you all this now. I've been sleeping really good. My chest is doing fine.
Number 2, Abaddon. The term Abaddon is a Hebrew word meaning destruction or doom. The term is used in the Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible throughout both the Old and New Testament to describe moments of doom or destruction, such as in Job 26 verse 6. The Sheol, meaning grave, is naked before him, and Abaddon has no covering. But it is not just a catch-all term for doom and destruction in the Bible. It is also a figure in the book of Revelations chapter 9. Then the 5th angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to earth, and it was given the key to the pit of the abyss. The star opened the pit of the abyss, and smoke rose out of it like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke from the pit. And out of the smoke locusts descended on the earth, and they were given power like that of the scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. The locusts were not given power to kill them, only to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like the stinging of a scorpion. In those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will escape them. And the locusts looked like horses prepared for battle, with something like crowns of gold on their heads, and faces like the faces of men. They had hair like that of women, and teeth like those of lions. They also had thoraxes like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the roar of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails with stingers like scorpions, which they had the power to injure people for 5 months. They were ruled by a king, the Angel of the Abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon. The identity of Abaddon is up for interpretation, but many believe that he is the Antichrist, and others Satan himself. Perhaps more optimistically, some consider him to be a representative of God, being a resurrected Jesus. Most interpretations are pretty dire in their assessment. If Abaddon is really Satan or the Antichrist, then it makes sense the Vatican would be nervous about him and his army of locusts. Number 1. Beelzebub. Beelzebub was a deity worshipped by the Philistines, whose name is literally translated as the Lord of the Flies. He was worshipped in Ekron before he was adopted by Abrahamic religions, not as a god, but as a major demon. In Christian theology, he is one of the 7 princes of hell, representing the sins of gluttony and envy. In the Testament of Solomon, he makes an appearance, saying that he was a fallen angel associated with the planet Venus, or the evening star, making him synonymous with Lucifer in this particular appearance. He claims that his methods of destruction are installing tyrants, causing people to worship demons, to cause priests to indulge in their lust, and to cause jealousies in cities and murders, and to bring about war. Some texts conflate Beelzebub with Satan, with others making them different entities. In these versions, he is said to have led a successful revolt in hell against the devil, being the chief lieutenant of Lucifer. He is one of the 3 most prominent fallen angels, alongside Lucifer and Leviathan, with certain texts such as Paradise Lost, describing him as being second in hell only to Satan himself. He is given credit for a lot of possessions and evils, with his name being cited often during the Salem witch trials of 1692 and 1693. His ranking in the hierarchy of hell, in addition to the understandable anger he would have at being displaced as a deity only to become a demon, would make me nervous if I were a member of the Vatican concerned with going up against demonic forces.
Number 5. Hans Schmidt. I think all of us, we want to be remembered for something amazing someday, right? That's only human. For walking on the moon, for writing the great American novel. Me? I want to be remembered for being a slightly above average YouTube host for spooky internet comment. Well, Hans Schmidt, a German priest, he's certainly remembered and found himself a legacy when he became the only Roman Catholic priest in American history to face the death sentence. They probably didn't put that on his tombstone or anything though. They say that you can see the signs of darkness from a very early age. Schmidt had wanted to be a priest since an early age, funny enough, but he was also routinely caught killing animals and drinking the fluids that were inside, and would apparently spend most of his youth at the slaughterhouse. And also his Wikipedia page mentions that he had a collection of severed geese heads that he'd put in his pockets. So yeah, maybe there were some warning signs and red flags here that people really were not paying attention to. By age 25, Hans Schmidt was ordained to be a priest and served over Mass for 4 years in Germany before relocating to Louisiana. Schmidt got himself involved in some wild crimes, doing some unspeakable things that the church covered up for him. Wasn't that nice of them? And they once again found him on the move, and he was sent to Manhattan at St. Boniface Church. Here, Schmidt would meet with the love of his life, Anna Muller. He became immediately obsessed with her, claiming that it was God's will he fall in love with her. Oh my god, ladies, don't you just hate it when a guy pulls the old, oh, it's God's will, it's God's will, all the time, eh? He began an affair with her, and he held a secret wedding, vowing to leave the cloth with her. When a Muller became pregnant, Schmidt knew he would be outed for disobeying the oath of priesthood. So, being a reasonable thinking man of God, Schmidt's solution was to slit her throat and remove her limbs and throw it in the Hudson River, and then went to Mass the next day. Oh, no, that's actually not very priest-like at all. Schmidt was tried, convicted and executed in Sing Sing prison, where, like I mentioned earlier, he remains the only American priest that's ever happened to. Although from what I've learned about the guy, I don't think anyone would complain too much that happened. I don't know if this was a huge loss. And if you're looking for way more stories of creepy crawlies, ghosts, goblins, conspiracies, and basically anything freaky under the sun and above it that you can think up, hit subscribe for Top 5 Scary and don't miss a single scream. Make sure you hit that little bell, but do it at the end of this video if you wouldn't mind. Number 4, Gerald Robinson. Hey, a little hypothetical question. If you're a priest, how much Satanism are you allowed to dabble in? Probably not much, right? They probably would prefer that be like as zero as possible. Gerald Robinson was a Catholic priest, but was living a double life, practicing satanic rituals in secret with horrifying consequence. In the 1980s, Robinson was the chaplain at Mercy Hospital in Toledo, where he ministered over the terminally ill. The caretaker of the chapel there was a nun named Sister Margaret Ann Powell, a kindly old woman. Shockingly and horrifyingly, Paul was killed after being stabbed 31 times, with 9 times in a deliberate shape of an inverted cross, and a smear across her forehead symbolizing a mockery of last rites. Police suspected someone was trying to humiliate Paul in death. Father Robinson was questioned, but not charged. A clergyman took Father Robinson out of his questioning, and the case would freeze for nearly 30 years. Reports on the case would disappear, and police believed there was a conspiracy of a cover-up. It wasn't until late in 2003 when police received a letter from a woman using the name Survivor Doe, claiming that she had suffered under the hands of Father Robinson, who had been assaulting women and practicing satanic rituals up to and including human sacrifice. With these new, lofty allegations, authorities reopened the case, and upon searching Robinson's apartment, discovered a sword-shaped letter opener that fit the wound in the nun's body like a key to a lock, according to prosecutors. What a charming turn of a phrase for a horrible thing. In 2006, Robinson was charged, and hopefully, Sister Paul was able to find some peace in the afterlife after such a mortifying ordeal. Number 3, Father Daniel Petrocorgano. When you take the cloth, you get called on for all sorts of things: marriages, funeral rites, confessions, and in the extreme cases, exorcisms, where you're the last line of spiritual defense against a demonic spirit that has taken host of someone else's body. Of course, exorcisms don't always go the way that you would hope. You know, sometimes a little pea soup gets fired across the room. Sometimes the person you're exorcising accidentally dies from your neglect. You know, anything can happen, really. Father Daniel Petrocorgano believed that a member of his flock, a nun in the convent, one Sister Marcia Corici, became the unwilling host to a demon that had moved in and paid first and last for rent inside her soul. Now, she was experiencing classical symptoms of schizophrenia, but Corgano believed it to be demonic possession. Sister Corici was bound at her ankles and wrists and given holy water to drink, which she threw up. I don't really blame her. I bet it probably tastes weird. Rather brutally, after this, Sister Corici was bound to a cross and was gagged with a wet cloth soaked in holy water, which we already know she doesn't like the taste of. From here, she was cruelly subjected to a round-the-clock exercising over the course of 3 days. I cannot even imagine how mentally and physically taxing that was. Now, she wasn't fed during this time, nor were any of her medical needs tended to. And I don't know how much you know about like medical stuff or the human body, but you need food to live. Sister Corici would unsurprisingly pass away from complications suffered during the exorcism, leaving this earth a free soul, if for nothing else. Now, Father Corgano would undergo investigation for his involvement in Cornici's death. He insisted that he was simply following God's plan and that he was trying to cure her the way God intended, and her death was an unfortunate accident and not his intention. Well, sure, you didn't kill her, but you did tie her to a cross and not feed her for 3 days, so you definitely helped. I don't know how to tell you. In the end, though, Sister Cornici's death was officially ruled to be caused by an overdose of adrenaline injections when she was taken into the hospital. Ah, okay, well that clears it up then. Total accident.
Number 2 on this list is the White Lady of Worstead Church. Similarly to our Pink Lady that we mentioned earlier, we have another vaporous demon ghost thing resembling that of a woman. In 1972, 1875, Diane and Peter Berthelot visited the Worstead Church in North Norfolk. Peter snapped a pic of his wife praying on one of the church benches. They didn't think anything about the photo at the time, just a cute day at the church, but months later, when they went to go get the film developed, one of their friends saw the photo and asked, "Who's that sitting behind you?" Behind Mrs. Berthelot is what looked to be the apparition of a woman wearing old clothes that were pretty much all white. This was obviously really spooky to the couple since they didn't remember anyone like that sitting behind her when they took the picture. They went back to Worstead Church the next summer and showed it to the Reverend. Apparently, this church for years now has been riddled by the spirit of the White Lady. It's said that this ghost demon is a healer who appears when someone near is in need of healing. When she visited the church at the time of the photo, Diane was in ill health and was taking antibiotics. Now, even though this ghost being is a healer, it can also curse you too. According to one story, on Christmas Eve in 1830, a man boasted a challenge to the White Lady. He said he would climb to the top of the church's belfry and kiss her if she would appear. So, up he went. Hours went by and his friends got worried though. They went up to go search for him and they found him in the belfry, cowering in a corner, terrified. "I've seen her," he told them. "I've seen her." And then he died. The demon or ghost or whatever it is clearly capable of totally stunning you out of sheer fright. I personally can't imagine the feeling of literally dying out of fear, but that's what happened here, and it proves that this ghost, if that is what it is, has demonic qualities to it. Now, this church has been turned into a pub, believe it or not, but this presence still lingers. I'm all for getting a brew with the lads, but not at the expense of getting totally shell-shocked like that. Number 1 on this list is the Coventry Demon. Stephen Wagner writes, on January 22nd, 1985, the Coventry Freeman organization were having a dinner event at St. Mary's Guildhall in Coventry, UK. Everyone in the group had her or his head bowed in prayer when this photo was taken, including a towering mysterious figure standing top left. The strange cowled spectre appears to be wearing clothes much like a monk frock from another time. Lord Mayor Walter Brandish, who was present at the dinner, said that there was no one at the event who was dressed like that, and he could not explain the presence of the interloper in the photo. St. Mary's Guildhall dates back to the 14th century and served as a prison for Mary, Queen of Scots. So as you guys can see, this creature doesn't look like anything human. I know that it resembles something like a monk, as Wagner was saying, but I also think that there's an argument that could be made that it resembles something from the underworld as well. The robes that it's wearing, coupled with the shape of its body, also coupled with the fact that no one actually saw this thing in person at all, kind of leads me to think that there must be something demonic about it. Also, the face doesn't look human at all. It's all black and those eyes don't look like human eyes. I have no idea why a demonic monk-looking creature would show up at this dinner event, but I also don't have any other explanation for why this thing popped up in the photo to begin with. Toss a comment down below if you have any theories on what this thing is or what it could be doing there in the first place. Number 5 on this list is Pelagius. Pelagius lived around 390 AD, and although very little is known about his personal life, we do know that the church was really not happy with his theological teachings. The Catholic gentleman says, Pelagianism radically corrupted the church's teachings on grace, sin, and the fall. Its namesake, the British monk Pelagius, taught that the sin of Adam had no bearing on subsequent generations. Essentially, man was inherently good and unaffected by the fall. In practice, this meant that a man could come to God by his own free will with no grace needed. Many saints fought against this doctrine. Saint David of Wales stands out among them especially, but it was Saint Augustine of Hippo, arguably the greatest of the Latin doctors, and the church's mightiest champion against heresy, who rose to fight against this inherently venomous strand of thought. Against Pelagius, Saint Augustine upheld the truth that God's grace is entirely necessary for any movement of ours towards God to occur at all. As he himself puts it, we, for our part, assert that the human will is so divinely aided towards the doing of righteousness that, besides being created with the free choice of his will, and besides the teaching which instructs him how he ought to live, he receives also the Holy Spirit, through which there arises in his heart a delight in and love of that supreme and unchangeable all good, which is God. And this arises even now, while he still walks by faith and not by sight. Everything about Pelagius's teachings went against what the church wanted. They wanted and believed that people needed to be committed to God through them, but what this man was teaching was kind of going against that. This scared the church a lot because it was undermining their power to act as the medium for the average human being and God. Therefore, Pelagius had to be stopped. There's no record of him being executed, but we do know that at one point he had to flee Rome and go into hiding to continue his work. Number 4 on this list is Asmodeus. Asmodeus is actually a demon, and whether or not he is real can definitely be debated. But what can't be debated is how scared the church was of him. Grunge says the demon known as Asmodeus appears in the book of Tobit, a Judeo-Christian book of the Bible that's either religious canon or apocrypha depending on which branch of Christianity you subscribe to. Asmodeus is said to be the worst of the demons. He doesn't hesitate to kill, and he has what has to be the lamest, most specific Achilles heel in the history of monsters. In the book of Tobit, there's a young woman named Sarah who would very much like to be married. She becomes engaged, gets married, and then right before the sweet consummating, Asmodeus shows up and kills her husband. What might seem like a fluke quickly becomes a trend, as this happens to Sarah a total of 7 times. On lucky number 8, Sarah, who must have been an amazing conversationalist for this many guys to roll these dice, marries a guy named Tobias, who the Archangel Raphael gives the scoop on how to beat Asmodeus. The demon appears on the wedding night, and Tobias tosses a fish's heart and liver onto some coals, causing smoke that triggers Asmodeus's asthma or something like that. Asmodeus scampers off, and Raphael tracks him down, ties him up, and strangles him. So luckily for us, the text says that there's no more of Asmodeus, but that doesn't mean that his evil spirit doesn't still linger on. This is a demon that we're talking about here, and one of the worst ones ever at that. So I wouldn't be surprised if getting rid of this guy for good is a pretty hard thing to accomplish. Also, just a sidebar here, but poor Sarah, eh? This lady's just trying to get married and literally has to do it 8 separate times before one finally sticks. I think after marriage number 3, I'd personally just call it quits and get a puppy or something. Number 3 on this list is Beelzebub, another demon who is probably one of the most famous religious demons out there. Grunge says Beelzebub a demon with roots in old Philistine religions. His name comes up in the Bible a few times in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, and he may be a stand-in for Satan, but another translation of Beelzebub is Lord of the Flies. John Milton's theory, described in Paradise Lost, is that he's a lieutenant of hell, second in power only to Satan, which is what folks in the industry refer to as Resume Gold. The starring role of Beelzebub's career is probably his part in the Salem witch trials, in which he was blamed for inhabiting the bodies of the accused. For anyone riding the fence on whether or not there was any real justice to be had there, it's worth looking at the writings of Cotton Mather, a Puritan minister in the area at the time. In his work of Beelzebub and his plot, Mather wrote that there is a devil in a thing doubted by none but such as are under the influences of the devil. If Beelzebub was actually real, then he is responsible for the death of tons of people due to all of the witch stuff that went down. Not to mention just the trials, but what sort of stuff did he actually make these people do? It could be any number of things that we still don't even know about today. For obvious reasons, the church was not too fond of this demon. But it wasn't just the church. Your average everyday individual wasn't too fond of him at all either. Like, think about it. Back in the day, you would have to worry about having Beelzebub come and get you, and then you'd be put on the stake for being a witch if you did. Now obviously, these witch trials were not done even remotely how they should have been, and it's unclear whether or not Beelzebub did or didn't play a role in them. But still, it doesn't change the fact that you would have been worried about him if you were alive back then.
Number 2, the wild and wacky life of Pope Benedict IX. Over the years, there have been many controversial popes. In fact, I would bet you can probably find more popes wrapped in controversy than not. While it's kind of pointless to compare sins on a sort of moral scale, it's hard to argue that few popes got up to even half as much chaos and trouble as Pope Benedict IX. So notorious, he once sold the position when he got bored of it. He was just done. He sold it. It said he began his pontification when he was a young man because his family wanted it. They just wanted it. They wanted him to be pope. Benedict loved the lifestyle and behaved the way Joffrey Baratheon would, spending his money on women of the night, hosting lecherous, wild, erotic parties with all manner of man, woman, and apparently animals as well. He really was not picky. It wasn't long before there were conspiracies being drawn up to assassinate the Pope, if you can believe that. Imagine that. There were guys sitting around a table being like, hey, we gotta do something about the Pope. I think we have to assassinate him. Possibly in a case of divine intervention, his enemies on a feast day snuck into St. Peter's Basilica, carrying rope ready to strangle Benedict, but a solar eclipse of the sun scared the assassins so badly they called the whole plan off. And fair. If I was planning to dispose of the Pope and then like 5 minutes beforehand I saw the sun get blackened out, I would assume God was gonna strike me down then and there. Failed coups notwithstanding, Pope Benedict's reputation did not improve much. He was attacked by an angry mob in 1045, forced to flee, and replaced by another pope, one Sylvester III. 2 months later though, Benedict would return to reclaim the title. And then 2 months again, he decided that honestly he wasn't really vibing with this pope business anymore, what with the constant bombardment and attempts on his life, and sold it to his godfather for what amounted to nearly 30 million American dollars. Imagine buying the Pope. Imagine the highest seat you can have in the Catholic Church and you bought it. If you can believe it, like Emperor Palpatine, somehow Pope Benedict returned. They just could not get rid of this guy. King Henry III of Germany had arrested Pope Sylvester for being a false pope, and the godfather Benedict sold the throne to had given up the seat, admitting that it was wrong for him to buy being the Pope. It was wrong to buy the papacy. I could have told you that. Henry appointed a new German Pope while Benedict was in hiding, and then that Pope passed away mysteriously 8 months later after being poisoned, which many historians suspect Benedict had his little fingers in. So Benedict came back to be a Pope for a third time, and no one was putting up with this. Henry III sent troops to drag him out of the basilica, and he spent his dying years in a monastery where he is now remembered as one of the worst popes in history. But he sounds fun. Number 1, Oliver O'Grady. All of these people have been awful or downright embarrassing examples of priests, and yet Oliver O'Grady might be the worst of all of them. YouTube content guidelines really does not like for us to be discussing the kind of crimes that he committed, but I will say this. If I say a Catholic priest committed a crime, it's the first one that you're imagining right now. It's that one. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you might not be old enough to watch these videos. O'Grady began his career in the early 70s and committed innumerable immoral, irredeemable acts on the most vulnerable members of his flock. By 1993, he was convicted and sentenced to a 14-year prison sentence and a $7 million settlement to the victims whose families and lives he'd ruined. However, and if you don't want your day ruined, pause this video, open up another tab, go watch a video of some like kittens playing or anything. Nothing good is about to happen here. He only served half that sentence. He served 7 years and was then paroled and deported in Ireland. In 2005, a video deposition had O'Grady confessing to having had 25 victims. In 2006, a documentary made about Oliver O'Grady called Deliver Us from Evil focused on his crimes, but more importantly, how the Catholic Church pulled a nice big white rug over the horrific crimes he committed to protect their clergy. The documentary outlines how O'Grady preyed on his victims, how he committed his crimes, and how the church was very well aware of everything he was doing and swept it under the rug. In 2019, O'Grady was arrested again. Oh, I can't believe it. He seemed like such a good guy. This time for owning deeply illegal lewd content. O'Grady would find himself in jail again in 2020, sentenced to 22 months, which seems kind of like a slap on the wrist given the history, but what do I know? Generally, I think if they make documentaries about the crimes that you've committed, that should impact the sentence slightly. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a YouTube host.
Number 4 on this list is the widow. There was a widow who lived in the 20th century who was a very devout Catholic. For some reason, this woman, who we're going to call Ruth, had a very strong connection to the spirits that were in purgatory. Her story goes like this. The first soul Ruth encountered was her departed husband. He had often been impatient during his bout with cancer and had reproached God. One evening, Ruth heard a voice. That happened almost every evening over a long time when she came in from the stable. Then she suddenly recognizes the voice of her husband, but she isn't quite sure yet. Then she kneels down and just prays the rosary. She recommends her husband in particular. Yes, she thinks, he was often rather impatient. Is that perhaps the reason he must still do penance? A few evenings later, she sees a nebulous apparition right in the middle of the room. She takes holy water and prays, "O Lord, give him eternal rest." It makes her very upset, and then she sees her husband. He speaks quietly. "Don't be afraid, Ruth, it's me. I may come here to ask your help. Pray 3 chaplets each day." And then he was gone. So every day she prays 3 chaplets. Each time she adds, "Good God, forgive my husband his impatience when he suffered." After some weeks, her husband stands again in the middle of the room. He looks well. He's friendly and beautiful. She recalls how he was a young man. He says nothing. He only looks at her so grateful and full of love. Then she asks him, "How are you, Jacob?" He answers clearly and quietly, "I'm fine. I may come soon. I thank you, Ruth. I thank you so much." And after this, he never appeared again. So that's a pretty famous story, and Ruth went on to interact with many ghosts like this in purgatory through her life. In fact, some people started to speculate that she may even be a ghost herself as well. Number 3 on this list is the Most Holy Trinity Church. Here we have another Catholic church that's meant for worship, but has been riddled by a haunting. World on Fire says there are a few possible origins of the hauntings that supposedly plague this old parish. One claims that the current church building, built from 1882 to 1885, stands over an old cemetery where some bodies are still buried. Supposedly the ghosts of the folk under the church haunt the building and mysteriously turn lights on and off, open and close doors, and walk back and forth. Or it could just be living people doing those things, since those activities, believe it or not, are not limited to ghosts. The living can also open doors and turn on lights. At least they could last time I checked. Or maybe I'm a ghost and I don't even know it. Anyways, another source of the ghost legend is that one of the first pastors of the church, Monsignor Michael May, passed away in his bedroom and continues to haunt the church grounds. Apparently, visitors hear mysterious steps at all hours of the night, and dogs have been known to stare as if in a trance at the stairs and dining room of the rectory. In all honesty, dogs staring at things, definitely not indisputable ghostly evidence. I mean, I've seen dogs do some weird stuff before, so I don't think that we can prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt based on their activities. However, it is very important to note nonetheless, whenever a big storm is coming, watch what your animals do. I bet that they'll go and hide or act differently right before a massive thunderstorm or a tornado or something. Us humans, we don't even notice it, we don't sense it at all, but they definitely will. This sort of weird sense, it also translates to ghosts as well, so maybe the dog really is seeing something from the afterlife at this church. Number 2 on this list is Anneliese Michel. This is a very sad story where there may not ever have been any ghosts involved, but they sure thought that there was. Wikipedia says, when Michelle was 16, she experienced a seizure and was diagnosed with psychosis caused by temporal lobe epilepsy. Shortly thereafter, she was diagnosed with depression and was treated by a psychiatric hospital. By the time she was 20, she had become intolerant of various religious objects and began to hear voices. Her condition worsened despite medication, and she became suicidal, also displaying other symptoms for which she took medication as well. After the taking of psychiatric medications for 5 years failed to improve her symptoms, Michel and her family became convinced that she was possessed by a demon. As a result, her family appealed to the Catholic Church for an exorcism. While rejected at first, true priests got permission from the local bishop in 1975. The priests began conducting exorcism sessions and the parents stopped consulting doctors. Anneliese Michel stopped eating food and died of malnourishment and dehydration after 67 exorcism sessions. Michel's parents and the 2 Roman Catholic priests were found guilty of negligent homicide and were sentenced to 6 months in jail as well as a fine. This might not be the most terrifying of all of the ghost stories on here, considering the only real ghost involved was the fear that everybody had to begin with. Poor Anneliese would have went through absolute agony in her final days when there probably wasn't any paranormal activity to even begin with. And finally, number 1 on this list is St. Rita's Church. Several decades ago, there was one heck of a ghostly interaction that went down at this church. World on Fire says, on All Souls Day in the early 1960s, St. Rita's Parish had a ghostly visitation. More than a dozen parishioners had gathered there to pray when sometime in the early evening the organ began to play by itself. Suddenly, 6 robed monks appeared, 3 wearing black and 3 wearing white. The parishioners attempted to flee, but they found the doors of the church were locked. The phantom monks moved towards the parishioners while the organ continued its dirge. Finally, the vision faded as a disembodied voice whispered, "Pray for us." So next time you see a ghost, it probably just wants to ask you a favor and hopefully not kill you. All they were asking for was a little prayer, which I think everyone would have been more than happy to indulge with at that time. Of course, having a bunch of ghost monks show up out of nowhere, lock all of the doors and keep you in there, that's pretty terrifying. Everyone is still very wary around St. Rita's Church in case these monks ever do come back. Number 5 on this list is the Lady of Guadalupe Church. This church is located in New Orleans and is known to the locals as being one of the most haunted spots in the whole city. This location hasn't always acted as a place of worship, but for a long time was a chapel that you really didn't want to end up at. That's because for the longest time it was actually called the Old Mortuary Church. As I'm sure that you can probably guess, the crowd that entered this place wasn't the liveliest. In fact, using the word live to describe them is just flat out incorrect. New Orleans was hit hard many a time with epidemics, with yellow fever being especially bad. There were times during the city's history where the dead were too many to handle and they had to go somewhere. Enter in the Old Mortuary Church. Thousands upon thousands of bodies have went through these doors over the years. In fact, for the longest time, the only people this place saw were the pastors who were here and the countless dead. Everyday citizens were too scared to come here for fear of catching the disease and wouldn't even risk going to see their departed loved ones. Obviously, all this death has left its ghostly mark. Eventually, it was turned into a full-fledged church that people attend, but not before the spiritual damage had been done. Nowadays, the spirits of some of those who died during this harsh period in New Orleans history still haunt the area. Glowing orbs have been seen by those who frequent the church floating around at nighttime. Subtle and faint moans can be heard echoing throughout the walls, as if the moans themselves were wind blowing through the church. The ghost of a man has said to approach people from time to time claiming he needs help and that he was never sick to begin with. This is definitely one of those churches who's seen its fair share of tragedy over the years, and it shows. However, believe it or not, it may not be the most haunted church in New Orleans, but more on that later. Number 4 on this list is St. Helena's Chapel of Ease. This chapel's located in South Carolina and is a ruin of its former self. A website all about Beaufort, South Carolina writes, "The chapel was destroyed in a horrendous forest fire that happened after the Civil War. Today, the ruins of the chapel and a graveyard remain. The vault still remains out of order to this very day. The planters left St. Helena with the arrival of Union forces in 1861, and the church never regained its stature. Some stories relate that Union soldiers used it for services during the war, as well as Northerners who came to the area after the war to educate and train the former slave population. The door of the Fripp's vault was ruined by the soldiers, and at some point it was decided to brick up the entrance. According to the story, workmen did a very good job of sealing the vault, only to return the following day to find the bricks removed and neatly stacked beside the mausoleum. This had occurred many times. Convinced that the supernatural was at work, the job remained unfinished. Local authorities had assured that no one had been in the area the previous night long enough to complete such a task. Today, the vault remains empty. The door is half sealed by bricks. One might find the experience of looking into the vacant vault more than a bit unsettling, if not downright eerie. Ever since that moment, regular ghostly sightings have been reported here. A woman dressed in 18th century clothing carrying a child through the graveyard is one of the most frequent apparitions that takes form. People have also talked about hearing people singing here even though they'll be completely by themselves. Usually these songs sound like church songs and are quite beautiful actually. Also, just a general feeling of uneasiness has been reported at this spot very often. This place clearly has a very strong spiritual presence, and I'd highly recommend giving a prayer before entering it. Number 3 on this list is Nidaros Cathedral. Located in Norway, this is referred to by locals as the most important Norwegian cathedral and also the most haunted. Taking a look at this thing on the outside, it's certainly very beautiful, but also gives me some serious haunted vibes. And those vibes are well founded. The church was finished being built in 1300 and is directly in the center of the city of Trondheim. It's certainly been around for a large part of Norway's history, however the hauntings at this church have been pretty recent relative to how long it's been around. It all started in 1924 when Bishop Mary Gleditch saw something pretty scary and gruesome. The ghost of a monk who had a massive slash directly across his neck. This monk has been spotted haunting the church ever since, but the weird thing is, nobody knows why. Historians have combed through Norway's history and can't seem to find a time that any order of monks would have stayed at this church. Now at the end of the day, this doesn't mean that having a ghost monk is impossible by any means. It's totally possible that a singular monk just happened to be at this church for some reason and through some tragedy died, or by the nature of that cut was potentially murdered. Whatever his reasoning for being there, he certainly is. Many visitors have spotted him, and some have said that they've seen him playing the organ in the church before. I personally can't imagine stumbling upon a monk whose throat is totally cut playing the organ. This is definitely one that deserves a prayer before entry.
In second place, we're visiting l'Abbaye de Mortimer, or Mortimer Abbey. It was originally built in 1134 on land gifted by King Henry I. The stagnant water of the drainage lake, which was dug out by the monks to dry up the marshy land, was called Mortimer, or the Dead Pond, giving the monastery its name. Totally not ominous or anything. The monks constructed what was then one of the largest monasteries in the world on said land. The legend says that after the passing of his only son, King Henry wanted to reform his daughter Matilda and had her locked in a room in the abbey for 5 years. The anger and hate she felt from being sent away and isolated stained and seeped into the walls of the monastery, cursing it for eternity. After her eventual release, she went on to live until 1167, when it said her spirit returned to Mortimer Abbey to haunt the area as the White Lady. She is said to appear on nights close to a full moon, moaning as she drifts through the now ruins of the monastery. Those that have seen her report that she alternates between wearing black and white gloves. If she appears to you with white gloves on, you're destined for good luck. But if she appears with black, you'll be expected to pass within a year. Alas, Matilda is not the only spirit one must worry about if visiting the abbey. When the monastery was at its peak in the 1500s, a frail and suffering woman was brought to the monks with an illness it was believed that only they could aid. It was revealed that she was possessed by the spirit of a wolf and cursed to become a werewolf for several nights. The monks chained her to a room and conducted multiple exorcisms in an attempt to eradicate the spirit. The monks were able to exorcise the evil wolf spirit or demonic force out of the woman, but it then attached itself to the grounds and walls of the monastery. Several hundred years later, in 1884, a man named Roger Saboureau was hunting in the woods nearby when he was attacked by a large werewolf. He shot it multiple times, killing the creature, but when he returned home at dawn, he found the body of his wife bearing wounds matching those he had given the wolf. People say the spirit of Roger's wife and his own heartbroken spirit still wander the area when the moon is full. The abbey was exorcised by the church in 1921, but still remains haunted to this day. And coming in first place, we have the Abbey of the Black Hag, locally known as Monastery Galagduff, please don't curse me for my pronunciation, St. Catherine's Abbey, or simply as Old Abbey. It's located roughly 2 miles east of the village of Shanagolden, in the townland of Old Abbey. Gee, can you tell where it got its name? One of the earliest recorded nunneries in Ireland, with its first official record being around 1298, it was built on land donated by John Fitzthomas, and has the typical layout for abbeys of its time, with a dining hall, cells, isolated meditation areas, and other rooms still able to be identified amongst the ruins today. During the 15th century, there was a major battle for supremacy in the area between the Earl Fitzgerald and the prestigious Butler family, of which the Earldom of Ormond belonged. It got to such an extent that the local bishop was known to pray for peace between the families at masses. During one of the nightly attacks, Earl Fitzgerald attempted to get his wife to safety, but as he was pulling her onto his horse, an arrow pierced her thigh, shattering the bone and spraying red bodily fluids. As he rode on, the Countess appeared to have succumbed to her injury, leading the Earl to seek sanctuary at St. Catherine's. The heartbroken man was certain his wife had passed, so he swiftly buried her beneath the altar and continued elsewhere to find safety. As the night went on, the nuns and residents began to hear hair-raising screams and made the decision to rebury the Countess in hopes of bringing her peace. When they dug up the body, they discovered her fingers were broken and her nails had been torn off. The poor woman had been buried alive, with a very slow and torturous end of her life. To this day, it is believed that the Countess has been unable to find peace and continues to scream in anguish, waiting for her husband to save her from a fate truly worse than death. Moving slightly ahead in time, we come to the Black Nun herself. Described as one in the order that wasn't content with being humble, helping others over herself, and the servitude to God, she instead craved power. The hag had her own cell, where she worshipped Satan and performed black magic, becoming a slave to the occult. This was the highest form of blasphemy in the church, and the other nuns in the order fled the abbey, while the hag remained in her now house of darkness. To complete her rituals, the Black Nun would venture into the local community and perform depraved, lewd acts and offer sacrifices, with bones of young community members later discovered on the grounds. In modern times, visitors have reported seeing the dark, shadowy figure of a nun wandering, the feeling of being constantly watched, and a disembodied hand reaching towards them. It has been reported that flashlights cannot function in the nun's cell, and modern batteries drain too quickly to have any sort of rational explanation. And that brings us to the end of today's list, and time to either cleanse the air or just get to it and exercise the space. Hey, any chance you have some sage or holy water? No? Okay, alright, I'll find my own.
Number 2 on this list is Arianism. Arianism wasn't a person necessarily, but a full-on train of thought by many different people that the church was extremely scared of. The Catholic gentleman says, aside from the various Gnostic sects that plagued the early church, it is in Arianism that is arguably the most famous of all Christian heresies. It struck at the very root and core of Christian teaching that Jesus was God himself in the flesh and relegated the person of Jesus Christ to that of a mere created thing. It lives on today in varying forms, from well-known sects like the Jehovah's Witnesses all the way to the bizarre world of Apollo Quiloboy. Moreover, it still lurks within the sentences of some modern theologians who ambiguously state that Jesus is the Christ, but no more than an exalted man. St. Athanasius of Alexandria was the walking cure for this heresy. Stubborn and unshakable, I think it not a stretch to say at times that this great man stood alone against wave after wave of Arian attacks on the truth of the Christian faith. By emphasizing and stubbornly holding to the truth of Christ as both God and man, St. Athanasius effectively ended the reign of the Arian heresy within the church. At the root, Arianism is basically the thinking that instead of being born, Jesus was created by God. This obviously goes against a lot of what the church teaches and believes in, and therefore they weren't too fond of this thinking or anyone who thought it. Pretty much anybody back in the day who did wholeheartedly believe this was condemned as being a heretic, and some bad things would be coming down the pipe if that was you. And finally, number 1 on this list is the devil. This one seems obvious, but just because it's obvious doesn't mean that we shouldn't include it on the list. The devil has always been the one to blame for any evil that is plaguing the earth. A great famine takes the lives of thousands of people. The devil did it. Someone loses their minds and kills a bunch of people. They must have been taken over by the devil. My coupon for 20% off on hot wings expired a week ago. must have been the devil. Obviously, everyone was scared of the devil if he came for them. The church was scared of it, and the average person was scared of it. What is really interesting to me, though, is that the devil, even though he is horribly scary, is actually necessary to religion and the church. Without a devil, the only person to blame for anything bad happening would be God. The guy who's supposed to look out for us all the time would actually be the one doing all of the nasty things that happen to us, as well as all of the good things. Therefore, if we wish to believe that God is good and has our best intentions at heart, we sort of need to have a devil around to take the blame for all this stuff. It's just interesting to think that without the devil, one might be able to argue that we are the most scared of God. Not sure how I feel about that, but a cool thought experiment nonetheless.
In fifth, we have the Most Holy Trinity Church in New York, built sometime between 1882 and 1885 on land that previously served as a graveyard until 1853. According to local rumors, not all of the bodies residing there were exhumed from the graveyard, and the spirits of those left behind still inhabit the grounds to this day. The church property covers an entire city block, and it is said that there are false closets leading to bricked-up doorways, tunnels, and random sub-basements throughout the church and convent. There are also mysterious passageways on the upper levels of the church, where legend says only priests are able to enter. The church's rectory was built in 1872 by its second pastor, Monsignor Michael May, who later passed in his room on the second floor. Priests who live in the rectory have used that space for mainly a guest room ever since, as no one has ever been willing to live in it on an ongoing basis. Guests have experienced lights being switched off and on, hearing strange noises, and the sound of a person walking back and forth while trying to sleep. Phantom footsteps have also been heard on the staircases in the building, and dogs who were once kept as pets in the rectory would stare in a trance-like state down the basement stairs, as well as into the dining room when the building got cold. In 1897, a parish bell ringer named George Stell's life was taken in the vestibule of the church. Though there was a suspect in the case, a former parishioner who would later be executed for an unrelated ending of life, no one was ever convicted of the crime. The red fluids of Mr. Stell's, as well as the red handprint of the killer, is believed to still be on the wall in a stairway leading to the bell tower. George's ghost still roams the church and is believed to be the reason why the bells will ring suddenly, vowing not to leave until his death has been solved. Moving on to our fourth place position, we have the Aquia Church of Stafford, Virginia. While the congregation was established in 1711, the physical parish wasn't built until 1751. It was a gorgeous brick building built on a peaceful hilltop with a two-story crucifix floor plan, which otherwise known as a cruciform, which was considered a rather unusual style for colonial churches. Aquia was built to replace two earlier sites of the Overwharton parish, which were constructed around 1680. The inside of the church burned down in 1754 and was not rebuilt until 1757. It was then shut down from the Revolutionary War until the Civil War due to lack of funding, before reopening as a stable, campsite, and hospital for Union forces. It was during this closure that a young blonde woman was traveling the dark country roads, rural Stafford County, when a group of highwaymen accosted her. This time period was full of exasperated uncertainty from the war, and with it a severe lack of resources, food, and money. Men would wait hidden on the side of roads to steal the valuables from people walking or riding by their hiding spots. She ran from the men to the sanctuary of the church, but was only able to hide for a little while before they broke inside and ended her life. Her body was hidden in the tower, and the men were never caught. It wasn't until after the Revolutionary War ended in 1775 and the church was ready to reopen for services that what was left of her was discovered, a skeleton with golden blonde hair that was as intact as if she had been freshly slain. The red fluid that spilled on the floor from her death was impossible to remove. Despite using every trick known to man, the stains remained in the tower for well over 100 years, until during a modern renovation when the redness was covered up by concrete. With the facility still being in use today, members of the church have mentioned hearing footsteps walking around at all hours of the day and will break into a frantic run around the church at night, but no one is there. Noises can be heard in the empty tower, with some saying it sounds like a struggle, others describing a groan, whistle, or even a call for help. Many have also mentioned seeing a transparent woman in the church's windows, on the balcony, or even in the graveyard, dubbing her Blonde Beth after the hair of the skeleton. In the 1900s, brave people would try to stay overnight at the church, but were chased away by what they described as an unfriendly presence. A custodian working in the graveyard saw a ghostly woman's face floating above the graves, while another man saw a woman smiling at him through the balcony windows before she vanished. In the middle of this creepy sandwich, in third place, we're taking a closer look at St. Mary the Virgin, located on the outskirts of Clophill, England. Originally built facing the west sometime around the year 1350, it's believed to have been erected on top of a leper hospital run by monks. I'd like to take a moment to note that it was built in the quote-unquote wrong direction, with churches traditionally facing east, the direction from which the sun rises, which is associated with the location of heaven and the return of the Messiah in Christian religion. Altars inside of these holy buildings would face in the eastbound direction for prayers. Some have claimed that because St. Mary the Virgin faces away from God, it thus opens its doors to hell, and ergo responsible for the tale I'm about to tell. The building was abandoned in 1848 when the rector at the time made the decision to have a new church built, instead of expanding the previous one, which was much needed due to the rapidly growing congregation. Old St. Mary's, as was dubbed by the locals, was then primarily used as a mortuary chapel, holding bodies before they were buried in the adjacent cemetery. By the 1950s, St. Mary's had become so run down that it could no longer fulfill that use, with just the outdoor walls and tower remaining. In March 1963, the tomb of an 18th century apothecary's wife was broken into, and the bones were arranged ritualistically in the middle of the church. And once again on Midsummer's Eve of 1969, multiple women's graves were broken into, with bones being removed and rearranged once more. While the specific individuals involved in these acts were never identified, the arrangements found resembled those used in black mass rituals performed by satanic groups at the time. After the first incident in 1963, a rare decision was made to rehollow, or in more simple terms, re-bless the altar that was left in the building, in a failed attempt to protect the building from evil. Later that year, Reverend Harold Colthurst reported stumbling upon a group of men in the building that were in the midst of a mysterious ritual, being quoted as saying that the men were trying to communicate with evil spirits, chanting some sort of mumbo-jumbo. They were definitely in league with the devil. Modern-day visitors to the now landmark have reported seeing a plethora of ghostly figures during the day and nighttime, faint lights moving about before vanishing mysteriously, along with reports of a chilly and oppressive atmosphere even during warm days.
Number 4. Our next entry on the list today is going to be the Aquia Episcopal Church, and if you haven't said that, try saying that 10 times fast, I dare you. Located in picturesque Stafford, Virginia. The church has 200 years of history to it, which means it's also got approximately 200 years worth of ghost stories to study. When the church was first built way back when in the 18th century, it was stained by an unfortunate tragedy. You see, the surrounding areas were exhausted by war and the lack of resources, food and money, and as such, brigands would take to the dark country roads to attack innocents during the night for whatever they had on them. Well, one young woman was hiding from a gang of highwaymen and marauders and sought out the church as a safe haven. Unfortunately, the bandits eventually caught up with her and she met an untimely end. Now, these men were never caught for their crime, and her body was not found for hundreds of years, left there to rot and decompose. And many believe that because of this, her spirit is tied to the church. And there have been several reports of hauntings ever since the discovery of those accursed bones. Visitors mention hearing footsteps frantically scattered around at night. These footsteps break into a run, but if you go searching, you'll never be able to find anyone attached to them. Voices can be heard in the room where she was attacked, some saying it sounds like a call for help, or a painful scream of a struggle. Some go so far as to say they saw a transparent apparition of the woman in the church's windows or on the balcony. One story comes to us from a custodian who worked the graveyard shift there in the 1990s, claiming that he saw a ghostly woman's face floating above the graces, and says that he saw her smiling at him through the balcony windows before she vanished. One last one on this church. In the 1990s, to celebrate the bicentennial anniversary, the church sent out an invitation to a group of Civil War reenactors to fight a mock battle on its ground. During the night, one of the reenactors was complaining that there was a red and orange light that was flickering the entire night during the church that prevented him from sleeping. The man explained this to the father of the church, and the father explained back that there was no electricity in the vestry, and that the light must have been the spirit confused by why the Civil War had started up again. Imagine, you're a ghost, you're already out of time, and then you look outside and you see guys from your time? My little ghostly sense of the world would be so thrown off. I would have to buy a new ghost calendar. Number 3. Monaster Nagayal Duff, or Abbey of the Black Hag if you don't got all that time. Wow, you see that? You see what that church is called on that little chyron below me right now? I'm just supposed to pronounce that with like my lips? Okay, it's also called the Abbey of the Black Hag, and that's what we're going with. We're not calling it that other thing. I'm not doing that. Black Abbey of the Hag, only name this church has ever gone by, and it was built in 1298. And it was one of the well-known medieval convents in Old Ireland. The remains of the abbey still stand today in a secluded valley, making it already mysterious and supernatural place just that much more supernatural and overgrown and spooky. I mean, the place is called the Abbey of the Black Hag. You don't name a place that unless it's extremely haunted or if there's like a cool boss fight or something there. Sounds like it's straight out of Dishonored. It's believed that the last abbess, horrible word by the way, in charge of the abbey practiced witchcraft, and in the scary way, okay? She brought death, misfortune to the surrounding areas. Pope Martin V condemned the abbey, not being down for witches at all. The accused witch left to live out in the damp, deserted abbey by herself, which she probably loved because it sounds scary. Over time, her skin blackened, her hair furled, and her soul twisted, leading to the place being renamed the Abbey of the Black Hag. And if you can believe it, there's actually more to this one. The Count and Countess of Desmond once called the abbey home when attempting to flee their attackers, where the Countess was fatally struck by an arrow and buried by her husband. But it wouldn't be the end of the Countess, because sightings of a ghostly figure around the ruins of the abbey were common, meaning someone eventually went to dig up that grave, finding worn out finger bones, meaning she was still alive when she was buried. It's said now that a woman's panicked shrieking can be heard in the early hours around the abbey. Number 2. The Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory is an old London estate that has the unique distinction of being considered the most haunted building in the United Kingdom. No big deal, or anything. Almost immediately after its construction, stories of hauntings started to creep out. One of the first local legends says that in the 12th century, a priest and a nun had a naughty little affair, and when they were discovered, the nun was bricked up and left to rot in the nearby church. Since then, they say that her spirit roams the rectory. In 1900, 4 daughters of the then estate owner all said that they saw a nun wandering around the estate late at night. They tried to talk to her, but got no response back, just a scary ghost stare. The family claimed they'd see this nun around the property, and on one occasion they thought they saw the spectral apparition of a horse-drawn carriage with a headless rider, some real Sleepy Hollow stuff. From there on, there was all these reports of bizarre sounds or strange shadows creeping out the corner of your eye. In 1927, the estate changed hands, as the original family owning the estate had all passed on, and a new family, the Smiths, had moved in. Shortly after, they discovered a human skull in the cupboard in a brown bag, which is not a great housewarming gift, to be honest. They reported poltergeist behavior, unexplained footsteps, lights flicking around them, and the same sightings of headless specters. Now, they only lasted 2 years, not being down for any of the hauntings or skulls in cupboards, any of that business. And the next family, the Foysters, didn't have much better luck. They had objects flying around their home, and on one occasion claimed their daughter was attacked by something truly horrible. They moved out as well. And the last owner of the rectory would be Captain Gregson, who accidentally lit the estate ablaze while unpacking, although insurance claims they think the fire was started intentionally, perhaps in a desperate attempt to cast away whatever evil has been trapped in the Borley Rectory for so long, or perhaps he unintentionally unleashed it out into the world. Time will tell. At number 1, Mortimer Abbey. Mortimer Abbey is a monastery in the forest of Lyons, France. A real old church built in 1134 on marshland, near the stagnant water of the drainage lake. The monks dug it out to try and dry the marshy land around the Fulbrock stream, which was called the Dead Pond. In French, Meltmal, which is where the name comes from. You can kind of hear it there. Mortimer, you know. Perhaps it's this history of being built on a dead pond is why Mortimer Abbey was doomed to be haunted. Now, the abbey flourished for centuries, but over time started to become claimed by the passage of time, and it fell into decline and disrepair. In the 17th century, there was an attempt to try and rebuild the abbey and recapture its former old glory, but the decline was already pretty present and had set in by that point, and by the time of the French Revolution, only 5 monks still remained in the abbey. Eventually, the abbey would collapse entirely and go private, and in 1863, the abbey would find itself in the hands of a rich Parisian family, the Delarues. Mr. Delarue moved his wife and his sons into the abbey, but soon discovered they weren't weren't the only tenants. While walking the lawns, the young people of the house saw a light from the library. As if by an invisible hand, these hatches unfastened, their handles turned, and the windows and doors all opened. The paintings on the inside of the abbey turned themselves around and steps thundered out into the halls, and nobody moved out immediately after. I would have started looking for new real estate right then and there. But one night the young Delarue, Charles, had his fiancée over to come see the estate that would become her new home in marriage. She was offered the guest room, but found herself terrified during the night when she couldn't sleep because she was too busy being tormented by mysterious sounds and objects around the room that were hurling themselves around, being possessed by something. Having had, quite frankly, enough, like I think any of us might have, the young suitor announced she would never live in this house, called off the entire marriage, and hurried back to Paris tout de suite, where there were plenty of handsome young men asking her hand in marriage who didn't live in old haunted estates, okay? That's the message to take away from this. Get the love you deserve, and the love you deserve is not in a haunted house.